Every schoolchild knows that the explorer Christopher Columbus discovered the New World by sailing across the Atlantic in 3 tiny ships in 1492. Every child also knows that it was Columbus who first thought that the world was round instead of flat, and that his voyage not only discovered an entire new hemisphere, but it also set straight the science of the Earth's geography. Except, of course, that very little of the above statement is actually true, and thus what every child knows is totally wrong. It's hard to discover a place where people already live. The Native Americans, misnamed Indians by our good man Chris, would be very puzzled to discover that this aging white man had discovered their land. Columbus can't even claim to be the first from the Eastern Hemisphere to set foot in the New World. The Vikings certainly did it in the medieval ages, and you can still visit the remains of a Viking settlement in Canada. The knowledge that the world was round was accepted by sailors and scientists as early as Greek times. Indeed, it would be hard for a sailor not to know the world was round as he watches a ship sail over the horizon and slowly disappear keel first. About all we can really credit Columbus with is being brave enough to cross the Atlantic in what were little more than 3 wooden bathtubs with sails. Columbus returned to the New World 4 times before his death, gaining wealth and prestige and then losing it all through the accumulation of debts. His treatment of the natives in Haiti was especially cruel. Believing the natives possessed gold in large quantities, he imposed a tax called the pound of flesh. If a native couldn't pay this tax in gold, he paid with the weight of the tax in flesh and muscle cut from his limbs. The population of the islands was said to number over 8 million when Columbus arrived, and within 50 years, the number of natives had dwindled to 0. Soon, explorers, monks, soldiers, and merchants were cramming into little wooden ships to sail to the New World in search of, or because of, 3 things: God, glory, or gold. The most effective of these conquistadors was a Spaniard named Hernan Cortez, who was down on his luck and running from a jealous husband who suspected the amorous Cortez of having an affair with his wife. Hearing rumors of a great Indian civilization possessing treasures and building 7 magnificent cities of gold, Cortez stole, in effect, a fleet of tiny ships and a small 100-man force and invaded the Aztec lands. Knowing that the expedition was all or nothing, he ordered his ships burned so that his men would know that there could be no retreat. Here, of course, is where the Aztec prophecy of the long-disappeared god known as the Feathered Serpent came back to bite the mighty Aztecs in the bum. This second prophecy referred to the god's possible return, born on the wings of a white seabird, bearing the symbol of a tree with a spear impaled through it. Take a second and draw that. It precisely resembles the Christian cross that Cortez and his Roman Catholic Spanish troops wore, and the sails of their ships could easily be seen as wings, especially if you've never seen a ship or a sail before. The Aztecs, although wary, welcomed Cortez as the return of the Feathered Serpent, letting the Spaniard and his men into Tenochtitlan. The superior weaponry of the colonists might have contributed to the fall of the Aztecs, but above all, it was the exposure to European disease, to which the Aztecs possessed no natural immunity, that brought their empire low. Meanwhile, other Native American civilizations, like the Inca, were being brought low in similar ways, and on the horizon was a new horror: sugar. The Europeans had an enormous craving for sweets, a taste supplied by the growing of sugarcane. Sugarcane is unfortunately a fairly demanding plant when it comes to the room it needs in order to grow, and Europe was, by this time, incredibly crowded. The discovery of the New World was a godsend, for it meant miles and miles of land in which to grow this precious crop. Of course, the original workers of these massive plantations were captured Native Americans who succumbed to European disease so quickly that another source of labor had to be found. European eyes turned to Africa, where in return for gifts of European merchandise like guns and sugar, African chiefs sold some of their own people into slavery.